On the show today, we have Michael Timms, and here is why he is awesome. He's a leadership development consultant, best-selling author, and keynote speaker who specializes in helping CEOs and management teams create cultures rooted in leadership and accountability that lead to sustained growth and peak performance. He does a lot with a lot. His latest book, How Leaders Can Inspire Accountability, 3 Habits That Make or Break Leaders and Elevate Organizational Performance. Well, it helps us begin transforming positional leaders into true leaders. He's a TEDx talker. He's got one under his belt where he talks how to claim your leadership power. It's getting a lot of attention. If you haven't watched it, highly recommend. But don't do that right now because I've got Michael here for us right now. Hi, Michael.
Hey, Russell, how's it going?
It's going really, really well. I always enjoy talking to a fellow Canadian. Thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, for sure. No, it's likewise, man.
All good. And there's a lot of Americans that listen to the show. I'm sorry, there's not going to be many boots. There's not going to be a lot of sorries. We are West Coasters. That is not as much here as East Coast. So sorry to disappoint.
That's right.
Before we get into it, I'm super excited because accountability is something I talk about a lot on the show and the lack of accountability. But before I get into any of that, because I've got so many questions, Michael, we have to start with the first question we start every episode with, which is, sir, what is your best or worst employee experience?
Yeah, I'd be hard pressed to come up with a best employee experience. I actually, so recognize, Russell, I'm a consultant for a reason. And one of those, well, for several reasons, but one of those reasons is because, when I was working in industry, I had five managers in 3 different companies. And throughout my career, my managers progressively got worse. And so first guy, great guy, really cared about me. Last guy totally did not care about me, did not care about really anybody. Total narcissist, I think he was a sociopath. He just cared about his objectives, did not care about, people were just a resource for him to get his objectives. And I think, it was a lot of negative experiences, but really he was just a super micromanager. And he would always say, just run things past me. Just run things past me. And it's super casual. But really what he was meaning is, don't you dare make any decision. Like any decision. Like that's my job. Your job is to simply do as I tell you. So there you go. That was my worst experience. And that experience lasted probably 3 years.
So here's the question I always ask when it comes to situations like that, because believe me, I hear a lot of those stories. I know the answer. I have a feeling I know the answer, but I'm curious to your thoughts. What did they do within that organization to be in a position of authority? Because they obviously got rewarded. They were doing something right. If they're in a position to be your boss, they've moved up in the organization, they were hired at a certain level. What did they do that obviously they didn't have leadership skills? So what was it that what got them rewarded?
Yeah, I mean, he was a highly skilled individual. So I totally respect his skills, and he actually taught me a lot about writing and and he got things done. I think he did not work his way up in the organization. He was hired, and brought in at a senior level. So I don't know, I really actually don't know where his background, but he came in at a senior level, and and he got things done. So I think that's what put him in a position of authority.
And that certainly is going to segue easily into our accountability thing, because we do letters of reference, and they're always people above them, not people that they
Right.
are responsible for.
Exactly. Exactly.
And to your point, he got things done. So anybody above him just sees the top of the iceberg and just sees deliverables and meeting milestones and not seeing the wreckage
They don't see the
that happens
carnage,
under the surface.
and
No.
all of the people that have left, and all of the lives that have been destroyed, right?
The entrepreneurs they've inspired, like people that just have gone off to start their own
Totally.
businesses because
Totally.
they never
He
want to work with
inspired
them.
me to start to never have a boss again for the rest of my life.
That one leader has done more for entrepreneurship than he could possibly understand.
That's right. Exactly.
So let's get into this. I accountability is such a huge thing for me. I talk a lot about some of the problems with leadership ecosystems, and one of the biggest ones is around accountability and the lack that we seem to have. And your expertise, your focus, your passion is a lot around leading with accountability. So before we get anywhere, can you define accountability for me?
Sure. So I define accountability as taking ownership of results and focusing on what you can do to improve future results. So it's kind of two things. One is the present, the other is the future. And in the present, you know what? I'm just going to take ownership of my current situation. I'm not going to blame anybody for how I got here. I am here and I need to deal with this reality and I need to own this and I need to own the decisions that I made that got me in this position. Okay? But the other part of that is focusing on what I can do, and that's, I think, where a lot of people really don't understand the concept of accountability because especially when I'm talking to CEOs and people in senior leadership positions, they want me to come and talk to them about how can they make other people more accountable. And they think that's what I'm there to talk to them about. But I do a little bit of surprise and reveal actually. And what I do is I reveal their own bias to them, do a little bit of psychology trick, and they realize, oh, yeah, I totally am thinking about accountability in terms of what other people need to do, not in terms of what I need to do. And really, in an organizational context, the level of accountability in an organization totally reflects the accountability of the leader. So if the leader thinks that there is an accountability problem, look no further than in the mirror because nobody's going to demonstrate accountability to a higher degree than their leader for very long. And so that's why really a lot of my work focuses on helping leaders step up their level of accountability before I teach them how to support others to be accountable.
Now, to echo what you said accountability is being accountable to the results. Is that correct?
Yes, taking ownership of
Ownership.
results.
So I want to go back to the story you provided because your boss was technically accountable to results. It's how he got results that was the problem,
Right.
right? So what's the accountability piece when it comes to leadership? Because that's the journey, not necessarily the destination.
Can you expand on that just a little bit? I'm not, what
Sure,
exactly are you looking
absolutely.
for?
Absolutely. So if your responsibility as a leader is to produce a widget,
Yeah.
so you are accountable whether that widget gets made or not. If it gets made, not how it gets made, not how many people left the organization to get it made, how many burned out, blah,
Ah,
blah, blah. It's focused on the result, not the getting there. So that's why I'm
okay.
trying to talk account leadership with result in that.
Yeah. So, and it depends on how you define results. If you're thinking about results as
Sure.
simply, getting that widget, I would say that's not a thorough explanation or definition of results. Results also talks about, results is about, what you produce and the impact. So, what was the impact? What impact did you have on the individuals? What impact did you have on their performance? What impact did you have on the organization and the systems that you left behind? Is the organization stronger because of your influence? Did you expand the organization's capacity? These are all results that we need to take ownership of. And hopefully people in leadership positions see their responsibility as more than simply producing widgets. It's also the impact that they have on individuals, organizations, systems, and the ability of the organization to do even better going forward.
Thank you for the clarity. I know some people will look at it and go, "Well, I'm accountable to the result. I like ends justify the means to get me there. It doesn't matter." I'm like, "Yeah, but you're missing the leadership part." So I really, really appreciate the clarity in that. Thank you
Can
so
I
much
can I
for that.
actually expand on that just a little bit?
Yeah,
Is
please.
that okay?
Yeah.
The reason why it's important. So accountability is truly about results as opposed to activities or tasks. And that's the distinction that we need to understand, when we're talking about accountability. A lot of people are, super busy doing things that do not produce results. And they're saying, hey, I'm doing my job. I'm checking these things off of my list, right? You told me to do this. I did this. But I think the thing that we need people to understand is that nobody on the planet was hired to complete a list of tasks. Everybody who is hired, who's being paid, they're being paid to produce certain results. And that is, I think, the key mind shift that, or probably the problem, if you as a leader feel like you're not getting the results that you want, I bet you people don't know what they are hired for. I bet you a lot of people on your team think that their job is simply to complete tasks, and they think you're the person that needs to take ownership of the results. But it's the leader's responsibility to help people understand what results were you hired to produce. You were not simply hired to do these tasks. What results were you hired to produce? And I think the more clear leaders can be with people about these are the results I want you to produce, the more the more results they will get, or the better the results that they will get. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. You also touched on something where you kind of dipped your toe in it, and I want to just clarify what's the difference between responsibility
Yeah.
and accountability?
Yeah, and that is the difference, is the focus on results versus tasks. So the
Right. Right.
responsibility is good. We want responsible people. We want to be able to count on people to do what they say that they're going to do, right? So that's good.
Yep.
But we, more than being able to count on people to do what they say they're going to do, we want to be able to count on people to accomplish what they say they're going to accomplish, to produce what they say that they're going to produce. So if I ask Russell to do something, because I know he's an accountable person, it's as good as done. I know that if Russell he's going to encounter problems. When I ask him to do this, for sure, there's going to be things that are going to come, you know, out of the weeds, and he's not going to see these things coming, but he's going to problem solve around it. And I know that because, he's an accountable person. He is going to deliver the results that we've asked him to deliver. And if he can't, he's not going to make me bear the consequences for him not. He's going to say, hey, look, I encountered this. This is a problem. Here is how I'm going to mitigate it. It's not the ideal outcome, but I'm going to make sure that you don't suffer the consequences of me not, delivering exactly what you wanted me to deliver. So that's the difference between accountability and responsibility. Responsibility is taking ownership of tasks. Accountability is taking ownership of results.
So, what does it mean to you for somebody to be held accountable? Because we talk about it like you're accountable, like okay, but then they don't meet those things, or they don't hit the vision of what they've said. What are the consequences like that? I'm just trying to understand that because we throw the word accountable around, but then doesn't seem to be a lot of follow up.
Yeah, so there's two sides to that coin. So first of all, I'm going to suggest that we have screwed up the word accountability, and we have used, as a society, we've turned this word accountability, we've used it as a euphemism for blame and punishment, because typically when we're saying we need to hold that person accountable is because they did something wrong and they need to be punished. And so when many people use that word accountability, what they're really saying, it's just a nicer way of saying that person's to blame and they should be punished. And so I think we need to be careful about, which in my opinion is the wrong way of using accountability. That is not accountability. That is blame and punishment. Let's be clear. Let's be clear. When you think somebody is culpable and they should be punished, let's just say that, right? Let's not use this nicer word of accountability, because ideally what we want is people need to take accountability themselves. Okay? So I prefer to say, hey, I'm going to support you to be accountable. We all need support to be accountable. I have, one of the people on my team, she holds me accountable. She helps me. Actually, I'm going to again back that up. She doesn't hold me accountable. She supports me to be accountable, because I think most of us do want to be accountable. Most of us do want to be proud of our work and the results that we produce. And so we need people around us to support us to be successful and to achieve those desired results. So thought I'd make that clarification.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
You were also asking how do we, so when people meet, don't achieve what we want them to achieve, is that what you're
Yeah.
getting at?
Yeah, I mean, we're holding somebody accountable. What does that mean? And positive or negative, it doesn't have to be, not attaining something, but how do we follow up, like, other than just using as a lip service as it's a word that we use?
Yeah, I think in the way that you're talking about it, I think there needs to be a key component of accountability is consequences, positive and negative. And so a leader who wants to get the right results had better focus on celebrating wins and providing positive consequences for achieving the right results. And those positive consequences don't need to be monetary. They could simply be telling stories like, hey, team, can you gather together? I just want to tell you a quick story. Russell, I'm going to embarrass Russell for a sec here, but he did this and he did this. And this was the result that he produced. This is precisely when we talk about the value of follow through, the value of accountability. This is what we're talking about, right?
Mm.
So that's a positive consequence. You know what? And it's also modeling and teaching at the same time. When people don't get the right results, really the consequence needs to be, we as a leader, we just need to address it. And believe it or not, that is one of my toughest jobs as a leadership consultant, as a leadership coach, is to help leaders address problems directly. Because most people, even those, and I'd say sometimes especially those in leadership positions, have a real tough time addressing performance problems directly. They talk around it, they sugarcoat it, but they don't say, hey, you know what? You agreed to do this. You didn't deliver. What's up with that?
Yeah.
And that is a consequence. And I think that's pretty much a summary of that's how we can hold other people accountable when they're not achieving what we want them to achieve.
In your book, you talk about 3 habits of accountability. You talk about stop blaming, making expectations clear, which you've talked on, and ask for commitments. What are we getting wrong? What of those are we getting wrong, do you feel, or at least could be a little bit more focused on?
Yeah, so I think we're getting all of those. Actually, we're not
Yeah.
consistently doing so. And I'll put those into my words. So I call the 3 habits of personal accountability, and I teach about personal accountability first, because as we model the way, it has this magical effect on other people's behavior. They then feel more safe to say, "Oh, you know what? I dropped the ball, and here's what I'm going to do to fix it." When we're modeling accountability, and so the highest standard of modeling accountability really comes down to 3 simple habits. Don't blame. Don't blame other people or circumstances for your problems, right? You are where you are. And when you blame other people or circumstances, it actually kills accountability in yourself and it kills accountability in others, because nobody is going to take accountability if they think they're going to be blamed for doing so. So, so if you want a whole workforce of people who are absolutely terrified of taking accountability, then go to town and you just start blaming them for stuff, right? And you will create a workforce of people who's like, nobody is going to take ownership for any problems because they know it's a career limiting move. But if you teach people, so anyways, that's habit 1. Habit 2 is look in the mirror. So say, hey, look, when I'm approaching a situation, let's say, for example, you're not hitting your targets, or let's say you're missing deadlines, I'll be like, hey, Russell, you agreed to this deadline, you missed this deadline. What's up with that? But I'll also say, hey, Russell, you know, is there anything that I'm doing or not doing that maybe contributed to you not hitting that deadline? What can I do differently to support you hitting that deadline next time? So let's talk about that. I'm going to take ownership for my part. If I wasn't clear on the objectives, hey, I'll commit to be more clear. And looking in the mirror is taking ownership of what is my part in this problem. Okay. I'm not saying you missing deadlines is my fault. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that I probably have a part to play in you not meeting your deadlines. Okay. If I'm your leader. And then the third habit is engineer the solution. What can we do so I can maybe, are there any systems or processes that we can put in place that will make it easier for you to hit your deadlines next time? Okay. But instead of the problem is that our brains, oftentimes we'll hear, oh, we need to give other people the benefit of the doubt, right? That's a good person. That's a good practice. We need to give people the benefit of the doubt. Well, the problem is most people don't realize that our brains are wired exactly the opposite. There's this weird psychological gremlin that we all have roaming around in our brains called the fundamental attribution error, which actually, anytime that we see a problem, if we walked into a room and there was like 10 possible reasons, and we see this problem, there's 10 possible reasons for this. If one of those reasons is a human being, that's the only thing we see. We only see the human being, and we completely disregard the 9 other things that could have contributed to that problem. We are blind to other causes of problems, including our own behavior, right? We're often blind to how our behavior has contributed to this problem. So my point is that as we recognize that, it becomes easier to resist the urge to blame, to look in the mirror and say, hey, before I'm pointing fingers and trying to figure out what other people did wrong, let's figure out what's my part in this. And as I take ownership and I say, hey, you know what, this was my bad, other people are going to be far more willing to do that. And then thirdly, let's engineer the solution. Let's come up with a solution that here's the opposite of an engineered solution. Russell, just be more careful next time. So if you say, just be more careful next time, or something like that, you can almost guarantee it's going to happen again, right? Because we all make mistakes. We all, get tired. We forget things we shouldn't forget. We get distracted, right? There are problems with being a human being, right? How can we engineer human fallibility out of this situation so that we get better results next time? Those 3 habits are what I call the 3 habits of personal accountability. And as you do a better job of doing that, you raise your standard of accountability to the level that it actually inspires other people to do the same thing.
Thank you for that. Staying on the personal accountability side of things, talking about how leaders may not necessarily see, like I think when we were talking before, how people will come, leaders will hire you, CEOs will hire you and go, make them more accountable, not realizing that they are a piece of the puzzle. What's the mindset shift from a personal accountability piece to get them to connect those dots? Going, you know what, it starts with you, but they have to start thinking differently because that's obviously not been their thought process up until you're in the room telling them differently. What's helped shift them?
Honestly, it's this little psychological trick that I do that helps them actually see their bias. And really, here's a summary of it. What I do is I say, hey, look, there are basically 3 ways in which you can influence accountability within your organization. One is through your own personal example. 2 is through the way in which you hold other people accountable, support other people to be accountable. And 3 is there are some organizational changes you'd like that leaders can make that will make it easier for people to get the right results. So if you had the choice of what to learn about today, what would you prefer to learn about? Would you prefer to learn about how to set a better example yourself, how to hold other people accountable, or organizational changes you can make to improve accountability? Now, I've already told them, and what I do is I get them to vote using a live polling app. They vote and I say, okay, so I haven't seen the results, but I know what you've said. I know none of you have, or maybe one, but almost none of you have said you want to focus on your own example of accountability, right? I don't know what the number one thing is that you want to learn about, but that's, I know, is going to be the last thing you're going to learn about. I show the results, and always it is to a T exactly the way they voted. And that's a little light bulb moment that they realize, oh yeah. And I said, look, this highlights your own bias around accountability, because the other 2 things are what can we do with other people, right? Because they're the problem. It's the irony is it's your example that has the greatest impact on organizational accountability. Nothing I can teach you about how to support other people to be accountable, or changes you can make to the organization, none of those things will work until you are already setting a high standard of accountability. Because what's going to happen is people are going to say, look, you actually have to earn the moral authority to hold other people accountable. And the way you earn that moral authority is by saying, you know what, we've got a problem here. Here's my part in the problem, and I'm going to do this better. What are some other factors, that may have contributed to this, us getting here? And what can we do to solve this problem? When you do that, and if people aren't volunteering and saying, yeah, and I'm part of the problem too, you've now earned the moral authority to say, okay, Russell, and what's your part in this? How might you have contributed to this problem? It's pretty tough for you to get mad at me or to take offense to that when I have gone first, right? But people get really pissed when their leader comes in at them and says, we've got a problem. What are you going to do differently next time? People do not like that, right?
No.
Because
Yeah.
you have not earned the authority to call them out. And so, anyways, getting back to the mindset shift, the mindset shift is to say, look, I need to do a better job myself of holding myself accountable and to modeling that example so that people know what's expected of them. People know that it's actually not a career limiting move to say, hey, that was my bad and this is what I'm going to do to fix it. People recognize that's the way we do things around here. It's not about blame, it's about getting the right results in the future.
So we're looking to introduce this into our team that we're responsible for. As a leader, we're responsible for a group of people, regardless of how big it is. Is it modeling? I hear communication being a big piece of this as well when it comes to introducing accountability into a team. Because if we're doing this self work, we're working on our mindset shifts, but our team might be diverse. It might have different generations that we're working with. How do we introduce this that is palatable to a team that might not be used to accountability as part of their culture?
Yeah, the first thing is model those 3 habits yourself. Do that
Yeah.
for a while
Mhm.
before you talk to your team about accountability. You need to model those 3 habits for a period of time
Mm.
to earn the moral authority to talk to them about stepping up their accountability. So that's step 1, and you need to do that for a while. I'm talking months of doing your best to model those behaviors. Step 2 is to clarify the difference between responsibility and accountability and say, hey, look, I think we can do better. I think we can execute better. I think we can get better results. But in order for us to get better results, we have to know what results we're supposed to get individually and collectively. And I think people need to understand, again, I think most people are confused. Most employees are confused. They think that they were hired to simply doing their job is simply, hey, I did what you told me to do. And I think people think that that is their job. And it's the
Yeah.
leader's responsibility to clarify that's not what I hired you to do. I did not hire you to do this. I hired you to get these results. Now, of course, there's going to be some things that are out of your control, but I'm asking you to own the things that primarily within your control, right? So I think that is step 2, is to make sure that people understand what results they are responsible to achieve. And if they understand what results they're accountable for, and they feel psychologically safe, they feel safe that if they don't get those results, it's not going to be chopping off their head, then they won't feel that they need to point the finger at their teammates. And they'll be like, oh yeah, you know what? I didn't. That's on me. And I got to do better. Right. And that's how you foster that continuous improvement mindset, is to you model those behaviors and then help your team understand what they're accountable to deliver.
I think you touch on something there that I don't think a lot of leaders get, and that's framing it around ownership. Accountability is one thing, but for whatever reason, ownership seems to motivate. Ownership seems to give that purpose to a lot of teams because they feel like they have more skin in the game. They're empowered by it, by having that ownership. Even though accountability is wrapped up in it, and they somehow understand. I'm just talking from my own experience, but when you have a team, you give them ownership of their deliverables, their ideas, their attempts, failures, and everything. It seems to almost give the team more cohesion. It gives the team more inspiration, motivation when they feel like they're a part of something, as opposed to being told to go do a thing.
It's hard to take a lot of pride, and and pride is part of ownership. Like when
Mhm.
we say, "Oh yeah, this is my baby," right? This I am proud of this. This is my thing, right? I am emotionally invested in the success of this thing. It's really tough to get emotionally invested in delivering activities or checking things off your box, right? It's much easier if your leader comes to you and says, "We we have a problem. This is the outcome we need. Can you deliver this for us?" I'm not going to tell you how to do it, right? I mean, if you have questions, I'm here to help. But this is the result we need. Can you deliver this for us? I can get emotionally invested in that. Say, yes, I will get this done for you, right? And that's ownership is a feeling. And we can help people feel that way, or we can make it hard for people to feel that way. And when we're focusing people on do this, do this, do this, do that, it's hard to make people feel that way. They're not going to feel that way. But when we focus on this is the problem, this is what we need delivered, and this is why it's important. Okay, I can get behind that. And that one shift, if you can make that shift within your team, you're going to find people are far more willing to problem solve around the things that come up, right? If I simply tell you, as a silly example, but let's say I need you to, Russell, can you run to the store and grab some bread, milk, and eggs and be back here in an hour? If I just say, hey, Russell, I need you to take my car. I need you to go down this road. I want you to go to this store, get bread, milk, and eggs, and be back in an hour. If you jump into my car and it doesn't start, you're going to come back to me and say, hey, Michael, I can't do what you want me to do because your car doesn't start. Or if the road is blocked, sorry, Michael, I can't do what you wanted me to do. Or if the store isn't open, Michael, I can't get what you want because the store isn't open yet. But if I just simply said, hey, look, Russell, I need bread, milk, and eggs here, back here in an hour because we're making French toast, right?
Right.
Can you deliver that? And I don't tell you exactly how to do that. That frees up your mind to problem solve around the things that are going to come up, right? Because you're not seeing your job as going in this car, going down that street, going to that store. You're seeing your job as delivering that result. So again, the more you can focus on results, the better your outcomes are going to become.
That's why I love that you reframe it as in asking for commitments as opposed to assigning tasks. Because commitment's a promise. Commitment is I'm in it with you. We're a team. As opposed to, yeah, I can checkbox leadership too and just, go through all these things. And at the end of the day, you're not really moving the needle on anything. And the team doesn't feel like a team otherwise.
For
Is
sure.
it how do you turn it around for team members that don't feel ownership? Because going back to that whole diversity side of things, we're not all the same. We don't all pull in the same direction when it comes to the vision and the mission on the board. We're trying to inspire ownership in a team that may look at ownership differently than us. How do we reassess that?
I mean, as you ask that question, I think you and me and all of your listeners are thinking about some people on our teams who are probably just never going to get there, right? I think is that kind of where you're going?
Well, it can be. I mean, I think my always issue with that is there's two ways of looking at it. One, we have to be adaptable as leaders. We have to listen and know our. So here's an example. I did an exercise with a team I used to run where we did a values and motivation exercise. So we went through the values and then we also shared them with each other so that we knew what each of us actually cared about. The other piece was about motivation. What's our primary, what's our secondary motivation? But then we had it as a conversation piece because what motivates me doesn't motivate Sally. But now I can communicate with Sally in a different way because now I know what motivates her: family, money, whatever. So I see this as trying to understand. ownership in the same way. Is what is ownership to you as a leader? Can I make those efforts to understand that so that I can cater the conversation and communication to you so it connects? On the flip side of that, yes, they may never get it, but we have to at least try to a certain point before it's a lost conclusion.
Yeah. I think I think what you're getting at, and you talked about how you got there, but what you're getting at is if you want people to own results, take ownership of results, you need to care about them. If you, or rather, let me rephrase that. If you want people to care about the outcomes you want them to produce, they need to feel that you care about them. And I think that's really the starting point of helping people, feel that ownership is that and people's willingness to emotionally invest themselves, their blood, sweat, and tears into accomplishing what you want them to accomplish is that if they feel that you care about them as much, if not more than those results, they're going to go the extra mile for you. If they feel that all you care about them as much as to the extent that they can produce the results that you want, your relationship with them is going to be transactional. It's going to be very quid pro quo, right? What have you done for me lately? And if I'm not getting paid for this, it's not getting done, right? I'm not going to go that extra mile, put in that extra effort. So I think the key thing is, and I know there's arguments about this, everybody needs to be treated differently. I think the essence of that though is we just as leaders must demonstrate that we care about the individual. That doesn't mean that we're not firm on standards and we're not firm on, hey, this is what has to be done, but that they know that we care about them first as a human being and that we're there to support them to get those results. So that's my thought.
Fair. I want to pull back the lens a little bit in this next couple of questions because we're talking at it from a leader and the responsibility they have to a team. But you work with CEOs. You work with a lot of larger lenses, macro lenses to an organization. What does an accountable culture, accountable organization, what does it look like? How are they making that part of operations?
What does an accountable culture look like? You know what? In high risk organizations, it looks like me saying, hey, Russell, you look, what you're doing is not safe. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want to be, right? So I need you to stop doing that right now. An accountable culture is where you understand the priorities and you understand the desired outcomes. And the desired outcome, in many organizations that I work with is safety. That's the number one priority. And it's me holding you accountable to agreed upon safety standards, right? We were all there. We all agreed to these standards. I'm seeing you not living up to this. I'm going to call you out because I care about you and I don't want to see you hurt. I think that's an accountable culture. I think an accountable culture is when you say, hey, Michael, you kind of, when you said that thing, that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And it didn't feel good. And me saying, oh, you know what? Hey, thanks, man. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'll do my best not to do that again. That's an accountable culture when you can give each other feedback without everybody getting their backs up, against the wall. Those are just some examples. If you want like one example that comes to mind of how like a leader created a more accountable culture really is around performance management. I was just a couple of simple tools, simple tricks that I gave her. She was struggling with, hey, how do I hold people accountable? How do I, and I just taught her there's a couple of key practices to helping people be accountable. One is to have one-on-one discussions with each individual. You cannot hold people accountable unless you're meeting with them individually on a regular basis. It just will, trust me, it just will not work. And so taught her about that. I also taught her about lessons learned debriefs. And so at the end of either a period of time, or if it's a project-based organization, at the end of every project, we need to build time into the schedule to have a lessons learned debrief. And I actually phrase, a lot of people call them retrospectives or whatever, but I'm specific on what is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is to extract lessons learned, right? And so when she got in the habit of doing that with her team, just those two things, she said, totally transformed performance management. No longer is it this, you're not doing this and you need to do this and you're going to get a low performance rating. She said it opened up communication and people were totally willing to say, yeah, how can we be better? How can I do better? And when it's framed, when you're building that relationship in one-on-ones and not just building that relationship, but building that communication vehicle through regular one-on-ones that they know that they can talk to you about the stuff that's important to them, and you're having regular lessons learned debriefs, it makes performance management, she said it's like performance management made easy. It's no longer this perfunctory duty that I have to do and that everybody dreads. People are actually looking forward to having these lessons learned debriefs and our one-on-ones to facilitate communication and figure out how can we be more successful individually and organizationally. Sorry, that's another example of what I have seen, how these practices and habits can transform an organization to have more of an accountable culture.
How would you see it demonstrated? Is it executive? Is it HR? I'm thinking of it from the lens of consistency and standardization, because not all leaders are created equal. Not all leaders have the tools to have those one-on-one conversations.
Yeah.
And yet, if you want accountable culture, you're going to have to get some baselines figured out. You're going to have to, again, consistency and standardization. What does that look like?
Yeah, and that's actually why I work with organizations the way I work with organizations. Because if you want to create an accountable culture, there's got to be some baseline behaviors that we expect of all leaders. Okay. Behaviors and practices. And what I do is when I work with an organization, I work with their top level first. And I introduce these behaviors and practices to that top level first. And I say, before we tell anybody else about this stuff, I want them to see you model this stuff, right? I want them to see you model these principles. And it's important that we do this together, that we're all hearing the same message, and that it's supported, by the CEO and the top leaders. Then we can, bring this down. But another key to my approach is that there are a million things you can focus on to be a better leader and to create this culture of accountability. I really focus on a handful of things, just a handful. What are the most impactful habits and practices to get the results that we want to get as leaders? Leadership, most people did not get into a management position because they were interested in being a leader. Most people end up in leadership positions because they were good at something else, and they were so good that they got promoted to be a leader. And so, given that that's the case more than 90% of the time, it's my job to make leadership way easier for people. And if we just focus on those handful of few things, that if you just do these few things differently, you're going to get way better results from your people. That's how we can create that baseline. And I think it really starts there.
Give me one thing, Michael. Give me one thing. One of those few things. Give me one.
Yeah, well, I've given you a few. There's one thing.
You've given me quite a few.
Yeah, well, I'll just reemphasize the place where you need to start.
Yeah.
If you want to increase performance, is to cut out the blame. And it starts with you as the leader. People are learning that from somewhere, and they're learning that blaming is the best way to protect themselves. And if they feel that they need to protect themselves, who are they protecting themselves from? It's you. So I'd say, if you want the starting point, say stop blaming. And how do you address problems without blaming? You say this: hey, where did the process break down here? So when you're saying, hey, what are some, let's analyze this. How did we get to the place where we're at, where we don't want to be at? What were all the factors that led us to this place? And so when you're doing that, first of all, you're communicating, it's probably not just one person, okay? There's probably a number of things that got us to where we are right now. Let's wrap our heads around all this. Let's make sure that we're aware of all of those things. But the other thing is when you ask that question, you're far more likely to get people to respond, yeah, you know what, Michael, now that you mention it, we don't have this process in place, or we need to improve this, or the equipment isn't right. And you know what, I probably dropped the ball in this area. I could probably do a better job. You're way more likely to get that response when you address problems without blame by simply saying, hey, where did the process break down here? So there you go. There's my little tip for you to get the ball rolling in the right direction.
I'm going to ask you a personal question to wrap us up here, Michael. You talked earlier about having a person that helps you be accountable. How did that person become that person for you?
Well, I hired her for that purpose. So
Oh, okay.
she's my assistant, and she also manages my projects. And we're each other's accountability partner. We each commit, we meet on a regular basis, and we each commit, like, look, she needs me to do things so she can get her job done. And, I need her to do some things so I can get my job done. And so I would suggest that, look, we all have key individuals within our sphere of influence, within our workplace and at home. And that I would say we need to do a good job of building an accountable relationship with these individuals. And for those people at work, I would find who are the two or three key people who either rely on my work to get theirs done, or who I rely on their work to get my work done. And I would set up a regular meeting schedule with them. And I would say, hey, look, let's first agree on what I need from you and what you need from me. Can we agree to deliver those things for each other? And then can we agree to meet on a somewhat regular basis to check in and see how things are going, to make sure that I'm delivering what I've promised and you're delivering what you've promised? So that's really the essence of building accountable relationships. And the same thing happens, in a marriage, or, partnerships, whatever. It's like, hey, look, this doesn't work if you're not getting what you need from me. This doesn't work if I'm not getting what I need from you. Can we just be explicit about what we need from each other? And let's lay that on the table. Can we agree to these things? And if not, can we find workarounds? Because it's way easier to address things upfront proactively than to wait for things to fall off the rails and for us to have friction and say, you're not meeting my expectations. Well, you never clarified your expectations of me, right? But that's really the essence of what I call building accountable relationships. And it's within our power to do that with anybody that we want.
I'm glad you clarified that, because, and I say this is, I don't want accountability to be thought of as something that people have to do by themselves. I don't want to look at it going, hey, leader, go be accountable, go make your team accountable. It is a relationship. Hey, it's the name of the damn podcast. It's about having those relationships that can be constructive, that can be supportive, that can be honest, and they don't need to be accusatory. Because accountability, to your point earlier, always tends to be about punishment for not delivering a thing,
Yeah,
when really it can be just a journey to get to a thing, and you don't have to do that by yourself.
for sure. Love it.
Thank you so much, Michael. That is Michael Timms. He's a leadership development consultant, best-selling author, and keynote speaker. If you haven't checked out his book yet, Fix That: How Leaders Can Inspire Accountability, 3 Habits That Make or Break Leaders and Elevate Organizational Performance. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks so much, Russell, for having me.